According to ancient legend, Judas betrayed Jesus for the 30 pieces of silver that the Romans gave him. However, upon seeing Jesus' miserable condition, Judas felt immense regret. Shortly after, he threw away the coins and hanged himself, ending his life. Those cursed 30 pieces of silver wandered the world, and it was said that collecting enough of them would grant one extraordinary powers. On the day the coins were stolen, a cow in the town was about to give birth. Veterinarian Elena ran through the rain to assist. However, after the delivery, everyone was stunned because the cow had given birth to a human baby. Mayor Paco, upon hearing of this, rushed to the scene. To prevent panic, Paco ordered that no one spread the news. Given how shocking this was, he took the baby to meet the priest. But when he heard that the cow had given birth to a human, the priest's expression suddenly changed. This was truly absurd. Later, through a video recorded at the scene, everyone noticed that there was a period during which no one was filming or looking at the cow. The priest suggested that it was very likely someone had swapped the calf for a baby during that time. Elena was at a loss for words. However, that night, the emergency alarm, which was only supposed to be used in urgent situations, suddenly rang out. The villagers quickly gathered in large numbers. A vagrant had stealthily taken the baby to the rooftop, muttering an unknown language as if he were telling the villagers that this was the child of Satan. At that moment, the priest and the villagers also made their way to the rooftop. The vagrant insisted that the child needed to be dealt with as soon as possible because the baby would only bring disaster to the town. After Elena tried to reason with him repeatedly, he finally placed the baby down. However, to prove he wasn't lying, the vagrant turned and jumped off the high building. Elena managed to save the baby and realized that someone needed to look after this suddenly appeared child. So, she entrusted the baby to a kind old woman. Unbeknownst to Elena, her good deed that day cast a huge shadow over the town. Later, Elena found a silver coin among the vagrant's belongings, but she paid it no mind. The next day, Elena went to check on the cow and discovered that its health was only slightly weak, with nothing serious to worry about. The old woman was very grateful to Elena because she had not only saved the cow, but also found her a grandson. Elena asked how the baby was doing, and the old woman said the baby was very healthy and ate a lot, showing no signs of being picky. The old woman even invited Elena into her home, and Elena graciously accepted. However, when she returned home, the old woman's husband revealed some things that no one knew. It turned out that the couple had once had a son who had drowned in the swimming pool. Since then, the old woman's personality had completely changed, until this child appeared, helping her gradually recover. Elena thought this was a good thing, but the old man shook his head and told Elena to prepare herself. After that, Elena followed the old man up to the attic. Elena was too shocked to speak when she saw that the newborn, just a few days old, was already as tall as an adult. There was certainly something wrong. However, the old woman was very pleased with her large child. After Elena left, the old man looked at the giant newborn in front of him and said they should take the baby away because the rapid growth was increasingly frightening him. The old woman insisted that the child was simply developing well. Despite her protests, the old man was determined to take the baby away. Left with no choice, the old woman resorted to a ruthless act, resulting in the old man's death on the spot. After stabbing him hundreds of times and slicing his flesh, the old woman suddenly had an idea. Looking at the corpse on the ground, she thought that high-quality food usually just needed simple preparation. She mixed the organs with milk and made a delicious meal for the baby. Meanwhile, Elena had gone to find Paco. She recounted everything she had seen at the old woman's house, expressing her concerns about the strange baby. Paco, however, thought Elena was overreacting. They decided to drive to the old woman's house together. As they approached, they noticed the inside was covered in cobwebs, and the old man was also entangled in the webs. Finally, Paco began to believe Elena's words. Paco knocked on the door and slowly made his way upstairs. The old woman unexpectedly appeared and asked if Paco also wanted to take the baby away. Paco quickly shook his head in denial, but the old woman lunged at him with scissors, wildly stabbing and then kicking Paco and Elena down the stairs. They fell, disoriented, but the old woman had no intention of letting them go. Paco, unfortunately injured, was captured by her, while Elena realized she was no match for the old woman and had to run for her life. Looking back, Elena saw the old woman close the door with a strange smile. She hurriedly drove to find help. Meanwhile, Paco was suspended by the old woman, who declared that he was to be her son's next meal. The old woman then showed Paco the toys she had prepared for the baby, and the child upstairs screamed in response every time she spun the toys. Elena returned with the police, and the sight before them sent chills down everyone's spine. The old woman urged them to leave quickly and not disturb the sleeping baby. At that moment, one of the police officers attempted to sneak up from behind, but the old woman slapped him away several meters. However, as she turned around, it was as if she transformed into a different person, someone who seemed to have known the priest for a long time. She said that if they handed over the silver coin, she would let them go. Suddenly, the old woman lashed out. The priest was caught off guard and was unable to react. The old woman and the priest quickly engaged in a fierce struggle. It was evident that something had possessed her, and the police had never witnessed anything so bizarre. Afterward, the officers fired several shots at the old woman, killing her on the spot. Elena hurried upstairs to find the baby, but aside Aside from the thick cobwebs, there was no sign of the child. An ambulance quickly arrived at the scene, taking Paco and the old woman away. However, on the way to the hospital, the old woman suddenly came back to life, pulling out a toy and continuing to mumble to herself. At that moment, a giant spider unexpectedly appeared on the road. The driver couldn't react in time, causing the vehicle to lose control and roll off the road. The giant spider then ripped apart the car door with its legs, and the old woman declared that her son had come to pick her up before she ran away. Meanwhile, the priest took Elena back to the church and revealed a secret tunnel filled with various weapons. While Elena stood in shock, the priest took the gun and removed the bullets. Suddenly, there was a sound of shattering glass from outside, indicating that the baby had made its way to the window. The priest went outside to assess the situation, only to be confronted by the old woman, who demanded that he hand over the silver coin, threatening that otherwise it would have resulted in a scene of death. As she spoke, she slapped the priest away. As Elena emerged from the tunnel intending to help, the old woman swung her arm and knocked Elena to the ground. Seeing the old woman approaching, Elena quickly hid in a cupboard. The old woman told Elena to convince the priest to hand over the coin, warning that disaster would strike if he didn't. Elena subconsciously took the coin out of her pocket. Could it be that the coin was in the hands of someone as lowly as Elena? After saying this, the old woman smashed the cupboard door and tightened her grip on Elena. In a moment of desperation, the priest suddenly unleashed his strength, toppling the old woman. He then soaked all the bullets in holy water to cleanse them, knowing that this was the only way to harm the old woman. At that moment, the old woman pulled out a toy again, but the priest showed no mercy. Afterward, he stepped forward to inspect the situation, and upon confirming that everything was fine, he picked up the old woman and carried her away. Just as Elena was about to leave, she was blocked by the old woman's child. A giant spider with a human face slowly advanced toward her. In a moment of panic, Elena picked up the toy that the old woman had dropped and tore it apart. The spider couldn't withstand the damage and fled. Elena was fortunate to have escaped with her life. After a while, the priest returned slowly, but it was clear that Elena was in a state of deep shock. Everything that had just happened was beyond her comprehension. The priest demanded that Elena hand over the coin, but she refused. Elena insisted that she wanted to investigate the matter thoroughly to uncover what was truly haunting them. However, what she didn't know was that the coin had brought her countless troubles. Looking at the mirror in front of her, she noticed it contained a separate space. Clearly, there was a book within the mirror. But when Elena turned around, the real world was empty. What was real and what was an illusion? Elena suddenly had an idea. She switched her phone to camera mode and zoomed in, noticing a line of text on the book. Immediately, she searched online based on that text and discovered that it was a book called The Gospel of Judas, which recorded the enmity between Jesus and Judas. Elena and Paco decided to find the only priest in town to clear up their confusion. Upon meeting, the priest quickly noticed something strange about the mirror. It seemed to contain a separate space within it. The priest observed for half a day, but still didn't understand what the principle was. At that moment, Paco pointed to a corner of the mirror where the door in the reflection was clearly open, while in reality, the door remained closed. The priest hurried over to open and close the door several times, but the scene in the mirror was different. As the priest was pondering, a dark shadow suddenly entered the room. Everyone rushed in, but there was no one there. The priest decided to stay overnight alone to unravel the mystery, wanting to see what was truly odd about the mirror. Paco took Elena out of the room. Once outside, Paco turned on the camera, revealing that he suspected the priest was involved in the recent strange occurrences, so he had secretly installed a camera to monitor him. The priest, unaware of anything, was still thinking so much that he was losing his hair. However, in the early morning, while everyone was fast asleep, the priest in the mirror suddenly lifted his head and slowly stood up, walking towards the edge of the mirror. The priest in the real world was completely unaware, while the priest in the mirror did not act hastily, but coldly stared at the real priest. The next morning, Paco and Elena returned to the room, finding the priest sleeping soundly, oblivious to the events of the previous night. To the priest, the mirror seemed ordinary. However, when Paco showed the surveillance video, the priest was terrified. In the video, the priest in the mirror stood up and walked towards a room where people were present. This sight made even the seasoned priest feel fear. In anger, he raised his hammer, intending to smash the mirror into oblivion. But a second later, a figure identical to the priest appeared inside the mirror, wanting to speak privately with the real priest and requesting Elena and Paco to leave the room. Understanding his intent, Elena and Paco exited. The priest wanted to see what tricks the mirror had up its sleeve. He held the hammer, ready to strike, but the mirrored priest suddenly asked if the real priest wanted to meet the child. Hearing this, the real priest immediately halted. The mirrored priest then pushed out a figure. It was the child that the real priest had accidentally killed years ago. Seeing the current appearance of the child, the real priest felt a wave of sorrow and wanted to beg for the child's forgiveness. But a second later, the child suddenly sprang up and passed through the mirror, tightly embracing the real priest and pulling him into the mirror's world, while the mirrored priest stepped out. When Paco and Elena returned, the shattered mirror had regained its original form. The mirrored priest then led Paco and Elena back to the church and recounted a story unknown to the world. It turned turned out that there was a church in Rome that had been passed down since ancient times. The source of the church's power in the ancient church could have destroyed even Jesus. Evil artifacts, such as the nails from the cross and the 30 silver coins, were also sacred relics of the church. If enough coins were collected, one would gain unmatched power. As he spoke, the mirrored priest shifted the topic, mentioning that Elena was holding one of the coins and that it must not fall into the hands of the wicked. He claimed that only he could protect that coin. Elena felt something was off. The priest before her seemed to have transformed into someone else. She used the excuse of going to retrieve the coin, unaware that the mirrored priest was secretly following her. As Elena was about to hand over the coin, she accidentally noticed that the priest's watch was running backward. At that moment, Elena realized that the person before her was not the real priest. She shoved the mirrored priest away and ran into the house, locking the door behind her. Once she was sure the mirrored priest had left, Paco and Elena returned to the mirror. If the previous figure was the mirrored priest, then the real priest was surely trapped inside the mirror. Suddenly, Elena had an idea. She reached for the non-existent book, reflecting in the mirror. Holding the book, she shook it up and down to confirm that she wasn't imagining things. Then, she threw it into the mirror. As the mirror shattered, an independent space suddenly appeared behind it. Elena and Paco cautiously stepped through the mirror into another realm, which looked exactly like the real world. Upon pushing the door open, they entered a magnificent hall. Strangely, every mirror there connected to various places around the world. The place Elena and Paco had just entered was only one of many mirrors. They even caught sight of pyramids in this realm. As they continued walking, Elena and Paco saw what seemed to be a figure gliding across the front of the hall. Approaching, they saw many people in red robes sitting together, with one person covered in a burlap sack looking quite different. The man wearing glasses, who resembled a leader, held a dagger and kissed it, then passed it to the red-clad individuals below him. Each person solemnly passed it along, as if performing some sort of ritual. Then, a person in white yanked off the burlap sack, revealing that it was the missing priest. The man in glasses demanded that the priest hand over the coin, but the priest refused, stating he would rather die than comply. He knew well what disaster collecting enough coins would bring. Seeing the priest in mortal danger, Elena smashed the coin against the mirror, instantly drawing everyone's attention. The priest seized the opportunity to resist, and Paco helped him up, only to discover that the tunnel behind the mirror had turned into a wall. The priest urged them not to stay there long, and Paco decided to retrace their steps. As they exited the world within the mirror and turned back, they saw that the space had indeed become a wall. The immediate danger had passed. When the priest returned to the real world, the mirrored priest vanished. At that moment, Elena finally understood the calamities brought by the coin. To end everything once and for all, she decided to throw the coin into the sea, believing that doing so would perfectly conclude the ordeal. However, Elena did not know that the coin would ultimately return to her hands. The calamity had only just begun from that moment. The old woman was aware of the long-lost ancient resurrection technique. She placed a wallet inside the scarecrow and then took out a photo of the target, examining it closely. Next, she spread wine evenly at the base of the scarecrow and finally sat quietly in a chair to begin her incantation. In no time, a mysterious power surged into the scarecrow's body, and its dry golden skin suddenly grew flesh. The next morning, a strange man appeared in the town. This man, dressed in tattered, muddy clothes, drew the villagers' attention as they stopped to observe. The strange man was none other than the scarecrow that the old woman had resurrected. He walked straight into Elena's home, and after bathing, his original appearance was revealed. The strange man was Elena's husband, who had been missing for 2 years. Elena received the news and immediately rushed to the police station. Though she did not know what had happened, the fact that her husband had returned alive filled her with joy. She embraced him happily and then returned home with him. After a long separation, the couple began to rekindle their romance. However, the old woman was watching their every move. Before long, the news of Elena's husband's return spread throughout the town. A man with a thick beard came looking for them, but when he saw Elena's husband, he was so frightened that he collapsed to the ground, as if he had encountered something terrifying. That night, the man with the thick beard broke into Elena's house with a gun and fired a shot at the bed, only to find it empty. The police quickly received the report and arrived at the scene, where the thick-bearded man was swiftly shot down. Paco also made it to the scene in time, but the thick-bearded man claimed that Elena's husband was not human at all. It turned out that 2 years earlier, the bearded man had a heated argument with Elena's husband, which led to him accidentally killing him. The bearded man had even dug a grave to bury Elena's husband, so the return of her husband was undoubtedly strange. Meanwhile, Elena and her husband were traveling happily, and she was still lost in her illusion of happiness. However, a single question from her husband snapped Elena back to reality. "Where is that coin?" "I'll ask again. Where did you put that coin?" After receiving a painful slap, Elena fearfully screamed that she had thrown the coin into the lake. No sooner had she said this than she grabbed the steering wheel, causing the car to lose control and flip off the bridge. From now on, we will refer to Elena's fake husband as the Scarecrow. The Scarecrow arrived at a gas station and shoved the unconscious Elena into the car. The gas station attendant stood there, bewildered and unsure of what was happening. Without letting letting the attendant say anything else. The scarecrow poured gasoline into the attendant's mouth before leaving in satisfaction. After that, the scarecrow drove to the lake and pulled Alina out. Alina, terrified, claimed that the coin was at the bottom of the river and could not be retrieved. However, the scarecrow was determined that it would somehow return to Alina. Saying this, the scarecrow wanted to jump in with Alina. In the critical moment, fortunately, Paco arrived just in time. After a fierce struggle, the scarecrow fell into the lake and transformed into straw. Fortunately, they had been monitoring the cameras and were able to catch up and rescue Alina. Otherwise, the consequences would have been unimaginable. Meanwhile, the old woman burned the photo of Alina's husband, suggesting that she was still scheming something. Following the location described by the thick, bearded man, the police excavated Alina's husband's body. After burying him, Alina decided to go to Paris to clear her mind. The coin that Alina had thrown away also ended up following her to Paris. In a high-end French restaurant, a skilled chef was preparing Fukushima salmon. However, when the chef was processing the fish, he accidentally found a coin in its belly and intended to discard it. A man raised his hand to stop him, thinking the coin was meant for him. The next day, during a date with his girlfriend, the man gifted her the coin, believing it held special significance. Alina eagerly opened the box, but what was inside sent a chill down her spine. This was not just any ordinary coin, it was the cursed coin that Alina had thrown away. Recalling the scarecrow's words that the coin would return to her by various means, Alina quickly made an excuse to go to the restroom to regain her composure. At that moment, a mysterious old man entered the restaurant and shot Alina's boyfriend, killing him instantly. Alina stepped outside just in time to see this scene unfold. She watched as the mysterious old man searched her boyfriend's body, seemingly looking for something. When he spotted the box on the ground, the mysterious old man hurriedly stood up to retrieve it. At that moment, the security guard arrived just in time. The mysterious old man was shot multiple times, but remained unharmed. Furious, he unleashed his wrath on the guard. In the chaos, the guard accidentally yanked the necklace off the mysterious old man's neck. Strangely, the old man immediately collapsed. Alina rushed over to check on her boyfriend, but it was too late. When the police arrived, Alina suddenly remembered the coin, but the box was completely empty. As she lifted her foot, she found the coin had somehow ended up under her foot, as if everything were fated. At this moment, Alina realized that if she couldn't escape, she might as well face the situation with courage. However, when Alina resolutely returned to the town, everything had changed completely. The entire town was shrouded in a fog-like barrier, making it could only be entered, not exited. What on earth was happening? It turned out that after Alina left the town, a man in a suit approached the old woman who had resurrected the scarecrow. The man in the suit personally handed the old woman a package, which she secretly poured into the wells around the town. It appeared that she was executing a nefarious plot. That night, thick smoke rose from all the wells while the villagers remained oblivious to what was occurring. Over time, the entire town was covered in a thick fog. A police patrol car attempted to exit the town to assess the situation, but it crashed into the air at the town entrance. It was then that the officers realized the town was shrouded in a peculiar fog. When Alina returned to the town, she suspected this was related to the coin. Without hesitation, she stepped into the dense fog. In an instant, the man in the suit sensed the presence of the coin. Finally, Alina had returned, and it seemed that the villains were prepared to reclaim the coin. At the same time, the priest, who had been absent for a long time, finally reappeared. Sensing that the town was being invaded by an evil force, the priest gathered weapons and ammunition, all blessed with holy water. He then joined forces with Paco and Elena to strengthen their righteous power. The righteous team, armed with their blessed weapons, made their way to the town center. The priest shouted madly, "Come out! I know you're here!" The next scene horrified them. A giant monster suddenly emerged from the ground. Everyone was paralyzed with fear. The priest aimed his gun at the monster and fired continuously, but even the bullets blessed with holy water did not inflict any damage. The giant monster simply waved its hand and knocked the priest unconscious. Elena and Paco quickly carried the priest away to escape, narrowly avoiding a deadly encounter. The giant monster, having lost its target, concealed its massive form beneath the ground, and the fog mysteriously dissipated. Though they had survived, the crucial coin was lost in the battle. As expected, the evil force had now gathered all 30 coins, and the townspeople had been brainwashed by this dark power. To thwart their evil plans, the priest threw the last remaining holy blood on the ground, and then used his finger to anoint his eyelids and the back of his neck. The remaining holy blood was applied to a dove, and then the priest recited an incantation before releasing the dove out of the window. With his eyes covered, Elena and Paco used ropes to suspend the priest. This was an ancient and long-lost control technique. At that moment, the dove, influenced by the priest, flew freely over the town, and the scene outside was transmitted directly into the priest's mind. After a series of skilled maneuvers, they finally fixed their gaze on the location where the heretics were preparing for the ritual. The righteous team then took out a map and began to plan their strategy. The next morning, the heretics started preparing their ritual tools. Shortly after, a convoy of luxurious vehicles arrived, with the bishop leading a group of people in white who appeared in the town. His followers presented a crown adorned with 29 coins coins and a sacred relic, awaiting the bishop to commence the ritual. This cult was poised to stand at the pinnacle of the world. Just then, the priest emerged through a secret tunnel marked on the map at the ritual site, but was quickly subdued. At that moment, the bishop affixed the final coin onto the crown, completing the set of 30 coins. The bishop placed the crown on the rooftop, and the ritual officially began. He declared, "Our era is about to commence. A new world order is about to be born. I will lead you." The words hadn't even finished, then the priest woke up and immediately rushed towards the rooftop. Without hesitation, the priest pulled the bishop down, causing the coins to scatter everywhere. Everyone immediately went wild, scrambling to grab the coins, with no one caring about the bishop's fate. Each person wanted the coins to gain unimaginable power. Before long, the crowd had taken the coins and left the scene, and one of those coins fell into the hands of Mrs. Paco, who followed a priest out of the town. Looking at the two bodies lying on the ground, the demon felt a mix of emotions. After years of effort to collect enough coins, it was shocking to find everything back at square one in just a few seconds. Realizing that the plan had completely failed, the demon had no choice but to change its form and leave. Through a mirror, the demon traveled to the center of New York, where it planned to establish its own church. The old woman dragged the two bodies back to her room and cut a piece of skin from her own body. She used a fountain pen to write an incantation on the skin, then opened the mouths of the corpses and stuffed the skin inside. Afterward, she produced numerous maggots and buried the bodies. The old woman smiled wickedly, and after an unknown amount of time, the priest's corpse awoke from its coffin. At that moment, the priest found himself in a dark room surrounded by mysterious figures clad in black. Confused, he stepped out of the room and, upon seeing the scene outside, realized he was in hell. Just as he was exploring his surroundings, two monsters suddenly appeared and took him to a palace filled with demonic deities from the depths of hell. Each face looked coldly at the priest, all being demons from mythology. The priest tried to suppress his fear as he walked through the corridor. As the priest ventured deeper into the palace, he saw a man in a suit with horns on his head. Once the man retracted his horns, the priest recognized him as the demon lord who had assisted the pope. It was clear that the demon lord had become the kingpin here. This time, he summoned the priest to propose a partnership. It turned out that the demon lord supported both righteousness and evil, but now he faced a completely new threat. There was a strange fiend who desired not power, but nothingness, which was the most terrifying thing in the world. If this fiend succeeded, both the human realm and hell would be destroyed. Therefore, the demon lord wanted the priest's help to stop him. Meanwhile, in the deep, dark prison of hell, souls were trapped in cages awaiting punishment. Elena's soul was also stuck there. A monstrous creature with a fearsome appearance continuously struck the cages with iron chains, causing sparks to fly and instilling great fear in the souls inside. Just then, another monster approached, and as it prepared to punish the trapped souls, the priest arrived in time to knock it to the ground. The priest quickly turned to Elena in the cage and assured her that he would find a way to get her out of there. At that moment, Elena would hold something very important in her hands. Elena had to protect it without fail. As soon as the words left her mouth, the monsters surrounded her, intent on capturing the priest. The priest ran upstairs and shouted for Elena to find a book, instructing her not to look at its contents. She needed to seek out someone named Lombardi who would know what to do. After saying this, the priest pulled open the iron cage door, and Elena seized the opportunity to escape. However, the monsters closely pursued her. In her panic, Elena ran to the balcony, but outside there was volcanic lava erupting. With no choice, she had to run along the balcony to another room. Inside, the souls were being punished, forced to fill bowls with their own blood. As Elena entered, she accidentally spilled the blood of the souls, which immediately caused discontent among them. The souls turned to surround Elena, demanding that she compensate for the spilled blood. Before long, the monsters caught up, and Elena's resistance was futile. The monsters easily tossed her against the wall, leaving her completely unable to fight back. They intended to lock her in a cage, but Elena clung desperately to a post. When she regained consciousness, she found that she was pregnant. Just 2 days later, her belly showed signs of impending birth. Seeing this, Paco hurried to find a doctor. After many hours of effort, the doctor extracted a mass from Elena's belly. This mass grew long, spider-like legs, sending everyone into a panic. The spider creature soon hid under a table and went silent. The next day, the doctor called a few friends, all renowned professors in the medical field, to investigate the spider-legged creature. As they worked together to peel away the fat surrounding it, the dead spider suddenly came to life, leaping straight onto Elena. Seeing this, Paco quickly grabbed a fountain pen and stabbed at the spider, trying to kill it. Once he calmed down, Paco discovered a key inside the spider's belly, and the designs on the key seemed to represent a specific place. Upon investigation, they learned that it was the emblem of an academy. Paco and Elena immediately took the key there. When they arrived at the library, Paco and Elena began searching for anything related to the key. But strangely, they also built a small railway, and Paco and Elena followed the tracks to the deepest place. Elena discovered a hidden door. Behind the door was a narrow tunnel. As they made their way through the tunnel, Paco and Elena stumbled upon a box locked with an iron chain. When Elena used the key to open the box, an ancient book floated up from inside, which was the book the priest had mentioned. While Paco and Elena were pondering the purpose of the book, a metallic clank sound sounded behind them. They quickly backed away just as a metal monster attempted to crush Elena. Paco swiftly climbed up and switched off the metal monster's power. Just as they dealt with the metal monster, a iron bird creature appeared. Although the iron bird was faster than the previous monster, it slowed down when it turned a corner. Seizing the opportunity, Elena pushed a bookshelf to block the metal bird's path, allowing her and Paco to successfully escape the academy. However, outside, they encountered a strange group of people who demanded the book from Elena. Paco and Elena hurried to flee to a nearby train station, where they spotted a homeless person. The homeless person pretended to be injured, lying on the tracks. Elena, being kind-hearted, stepped forward to help, but unexpectedly, the homeless person seized the opportunity to snatch the book from her. However, before the homeless person could escape to the opposite platform, a train rushed by and crushed him. When Elena and Paco arrived, the dying homeless person still clutched the book tightly. After a struggle, Elena managed to reclaim it. Meanwhile, the old woman chopped off a goat's head and poured its blood into a coffin filled with maggots, chanting, "Those who sleep beneath the earth, return. Let the dead be resurrected." Before long, the two corpses within came back to life, but since they had been dead for a year, their flesh had decayed, leaving them unrecognizable. To avoid drawing attention, the old woman led them to a dressing room. When they saw their reflections in the mirror, the two corpses felt deep sorrow. Their rotting flesh resembled that of zombies. They then took brushes, as if painting walls, to fix their damaged faces. After changing into clean clothes, the two corpses prepared to wander the human world. The reason for their resurrection was tied to the death of Father Lombardi. A day earlier, Elena and Paco had brought the book to the church, where they encountered Father Lombardi. However, just as Elena was about to hand over the book, Paco noticed that something seemed off with the people there, and hurriedly stopped her. Unbeknownst to them, Lombardi was merely a puppet, with the mastermind Barbo controlling him from a luxury yacht thousands of miles away. Barbo used a clay figure on the table to manipulate the puppet and speak with Elena and Paco. Sensing something was amiss, Elena asked Lombardi to say a few things about the priest. Just as Barbo was controlling the puppet to speak at length, an important meeting required his personal attendance, prompting him to delegate the puppet's control to a subordinate. But the subordinate didn't know Elena at all, and before saying a few words, the subordinate had already revealed a flaw. Seeing this, the subordinate immediately loaded the gun for the puppet, threatening Elena and Paco to hand over the book. However, due to the intense tension, the subordinate accidentally broke the puppet's hand. At the same time, Lombardi's arm also broke. Seizing the opportunity, Paco lunged forward, grabbing Lombardi by the collar and forcefully throwing him off the balcony. Lombardi slowly died, his body turning blue and shattering like clay. Afterward, Elena and Paco went to a cafe to rest. To their surprise, they encountered Lombardi there. Initially skeptical, Elena soon confirmed through a few probing questions that this was the real Lombardi. He led Elena and Paco into the church, where Elena handed the book over to him. However, as soon as he opened the book, all three of them turned their backs. The book contained immense power, and looking directly at its contents would blind them. Lombardi held up a mirror above his head, using its reflection to glean information. The book recorded a powerful incantation capable of summoning the Eye of God to restart the world. Since the writing was in an ancient dialect, Lombardi could only understand a small portion of it. Nevertheless, he knew that to fully decipher this ancient text, they needed to collect all 30 silver coins. The power of the coins could counteract the backlash from the book, but now all the coins had fallen into Barbo's hands. Barbo was about to conduct a mysterious ritual in Peru, and Lombardi wanted to stop Barbo's ritual first. However, just as everyone stepped out of the church, Lombardi suddenly had an ominous feeling. A bolt of lightning struck a nearby tree, causing branches to fall and sever the power lines in front of them. At the same time, Lombardi's people split into two groups. This marked the end of the film. There would be more parts to follow, filled with surprising twists, drama, and continuous intrigue. It promised many exciting developments in the upcoming seasons. If you found yourself captivated like I did, don't forget to leave your thoughts, hit like, and subscribe to the channel so we can explore the next parts of the film together. See you on the next adventures.